She finally hit a three. She went 1 for 7 from the line. But the funniest thing was she was actually running down the court, like slapping herself in the head. Like you could tell she was just so frustrated that she's kind of been in this shooting slump. And I mean, if you want to call it a shooting slump, if you want to call it whatever, it's just not Caitlin Clark shooting the way that we know Caitlin Clark.
Slapping herself in the head while running down the court. That's not the Caitlin Clark we've seen dominate college basketball and transition into the WNBA. That's frustration made visible. And when a player who built her reputation on elite shooting suddenly can't buy a bucket from the free throw line, going 1 for 7 in a single game, something deeper is happening here. This isn't just a bad shooting night. This is a pattern that's starting to worry people.
Can shoot. Caitlin started off the game hot. She started off the game right away. It felt like she kind of had a chip on her shoulder. She had a couple layups. She had an and one right off the bat. She had a couple assists right off the bat. She ended the game tonight with 24 points, 4 rebounds, 9 assists. She did have 6 turnovers. There was a couple turnovers in the first quarter that I actually, like in the first 30 seconds of the game, she turned the ball.
Notice the contrast in that description. Started hot, had the chip on her shoulder, attacked the basket early with confidence. That's the Caitlin Clark everyone expected to see in the WNBA. But then watch what happens when the ball leaves her hands from distance or when she steps to the free throw line. The confidence evaporates. She finished with 24 points, 9 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals and a block. On paper, that's a complete performance. But those 6 turnovers and that 1 for 7 free throw shooting tell a different story about what's happening in her head right now.
All over, and I was like, Caitlin, you know they're going to call this out. But I don't even mind the 6 turnovers tonight. A couple of them were silly turnovers. A couple of them were her teammates not being able to handle the ball. So is what it is. She had 2 steals and she also had 1 block. Overall, a more complete game from Caitlin.
Here's where the analysis gets interesting. Some of those turnovers were unforced errors, the kind of mistakes that happen when a player is pressing too hard, trying to force perfection. But several others came from teammates who couldn't handle her passes. That's a chemistry issue that goes beyond individual performance. When your point guard is threading passes that your teammates aren't ready to catch, you've got a timing problem that takes weeks to solve. And the Indiana Fever don't have weeks. They're fighting for playoff positioning right now, and every game matters. The shooting slump is what everyone's focusing on, but let's dig into what that actually means for a player of Clark's caliber. In college, she shot 38.7% from three-point range during her senior season at Iowa. She made shooting from the logo look routine. She had defenders draped all over her and still found ways to create space and knock down contested shots. That's not a skill that just disappears overnight. So what changed? The WNBA three-point line is farther back, yes, but that's not enough to explain a prolonged shooting slump for someone with her range. The physicality is different, absolutely. Defenders are stronger, faster, and more experienced at disrupting rhythm. But here's what people aren't talking about enough. The mental adjustment required when your shot stops falling at the professional level.
Running down the court, like slapping herself in the head. Like you could tell she was just so frustrated that she's kind of been in this shooting slump. And I mean, if you want to call it a shooting slump, if you want to call it whatever, it's just not Caitlin Clark shooting the way that we know Caitlin Clark can shoot. Caitlin started off the game hot. She started off the game right away. It felt like she kind of had a chip on her shoulder. She had a couple layups. She had an and one right off the bat. She had a couple assists right off the bat.
That visible frustration, that self-directed anger, reveals something crucial about how elite athletes process adversity. Caitlin Clark isn't used to sustained failure. She's been the best player on every team she's played for since high school. She's been the one who takes over games when things get tight, and now, for the first time in her career, her most reliable weapon isn't cooperating. That creates a psychological spiral that's hard to break. The dangerous part about shooting slumps is how they feed on themselves. You miss a few shots, so you start thinking about your mechanics instead of just playing. You think about your mechanics, so your release gets stiff and unnatural. Your release gets stiff, so you miss more shots. You miss more shots, so the pressure builds. The pressure builds, so you press harder. And suddenly you're slapping yourself in the head while running down the court, because you can't understand why your body won't do what your mind is telling it to do. But here's what that 24-point performance actually tells us. Clark hasn't lost her ability to impact games. She's finding other ways to score when the jumper isn't falling. She attacked the basket early, drew fouls, got to the free throw line even though she struggled converting once she got there. She created for her teammates with 9 assists. She played defense, recording 2 steals and a block. That's the mark of a player who's learning how to be effective even when her signature skill is betraying her.
She ended the game tonight with 24 points, 4 rebounds, 9 assists. She did have 6 turnovers. There was a couple turnovers in the first quarter that like in the first like 30 seconds of the game, she turned the ball over and I was like, Caitlin, you know they're gonna call this out. You know they're gonna call this out. But I don't even mind the 6 turnovers tonight. A couple of them were silly turnovers. A couple of them were her teammates not being able to handle the ball. So is what it.
The turnover situation deserves more scrutiny because it reveals the adjustment period that every rookie goes through, even generational talents. 6 turnovers in a game is high, especially for a point guard who's supposed to be the primary decision maker. But context matters. Those first quarter turnovers, including one in the opening 30 seconds, show a player who's trying to set the tone immediately. She's not playing cautious basketball. She's trying to establish dominance from the opening tip. That's actually a good sign for her long-term development, even when it results in turnovers. The worst thing a talented rookie can do is play scared, worried about making mistakes instead of making plays. Clark is still playing aggressively, still trying to thread passes into tight windows, still attempting to push the pace and create advantages before the defense gets set. Some of those passes are going to get picked off. Some of her teammates aren't going to be ready for the ball when it arrives. That's part of the learning curve. What should concern the Fever coaching staff isn't the turnovers themselves, it's whether those turnovers are coming from the same mistakes over and over, or whether they're the result of trying different things and learning what works at this level. From the description we heard, it sounds like a mix. Some silly turnovers that came from carelessness or poor decision-making. Some turnovers that came from teammates not being on the same page. That second category will improve naturally as the team builds chemistry and players learn each other's tendencies.
Slump. And I mean, if you want to call it a shooting slump, if you want to call it whatever, it's just not Caitlin Clark shooting the way that we know Caitlin Clark can shoot. Caitlin started off the game hot. She started off the game right away. It felt like she kind of had a chip on her shoulder. She had a couple layups. She had an and one right off the bat. She had a couple assists right off the bat. She ended the game tonight with 24 points, 4 rebounds, 9 assists. She did have.
The chip on her shoulder is real, and it's necessary. Every high draft pick who comes into the WNBA with massive hype faces the same challenge, proving you belong while everyone watches for you to fail. Clark has had to deal with more scrutiny than most rookies because of the attention she brought from college basketball. Every mistake gets magnified. Every shooting slump becomes a referendum on whether she can play at this level. Every turnover gets counted and compared to her assist numbers. That kind of pressure would break most players. But the fact that she's channeling it into aggression, into attacking the basket early, into playing with that edge, suggests she's got the mental toughness to work through this adjustment period. The physical tools were never in question. The shooting ability will return once she gets comfortable with the speed and physicality of the professional game. What matters most is whether she maintains that competitive fire while she's figuring things out. The 1-for-7 free throw shooting is particularly concerning because free throws are supposed to be the constant. When everything else is going wrong, when your three-point shot isn't falling and defenders are making life difficult, you're supposed to be able to step to the line and knock down free throws. They're called free throws for a reason. Nobody's guarding you. It's just you, the ball, and the basket. When a player who shot 85% from the free throw line in college suddenly can't make them in the pros, that's a mental issue more than a physical one.
6 turnovers. There was a couple turnovers in the first quarter that I actually, like in the first like 30 seconds of the game, she turned the ball over and I was like, Caitlin, you know they're going to call this out. You know they're going to call this out. But I don't even mind the 6 turnovers tonight. A couple of them were silly turnovers. A couple of them were her teammates not being able to handle the ball. So is what it is. She had 2 steals and she also had 1 block.
Here's what makes this performance more complete than the raw numbers suggest. Clark is learning to impact winning in multiple ways. She's not just a shooter who disappears when the shot isn't falling. She's creating for others, playing defense, attacking the basket, and finding ways to contribute even when her signature skill is off. That versatility is what separates good players from great ones at the professional level. The WNBA is full of players who were dominant scorers in college but couldn't adjust when their primary weapon wasn't as effective against professional competition. They became one-dimensional, easy to game plan against, and eventually they were out of the league. Clark is showing early signs that she won't be that type of player. She's adapting her game, finding new ways to be effective and maintaining her competitive intensity even through frustration. That visible frustration, that self-directed anger, is actually healthy in small doses. It shows she cares. It shows she has high standards for herself. The key is whether she can channel that frustration into productive adjustments or whether it spirals into self-doubt and tentative play. Based on how she started the game, attacking aggressively and playing with confidence, it seems like she's processing the adversity in a constructive way. The real test will come over the next few weeks. Shooting slumps don't fix themselves overnight. She's going to have to put in extra work in practice, probably going back to basics with her shooting mechanics, building confidence through repetition. She's going to have to trust that the work will pay off even when the results aren't showing up immediately in games. And she's going to have to resist the temptation to force things, to try to shoot her way out of the slump by taking bad shots or pressing too hard. The Fever need her to figure this out quickly because they're in a competitive playoff race. But they also need to give her the space to work through it without adding more pressure. That's a delicate balance for a coaching staff to manage. You want to support your star player while also holding her accountable. You want to encourage her to keep shooting while also making sure she's taking good shots within the flow of the offense. What we're watching is the real-time adjustment of a generational talent to professional basketball. It's not always pretty. There are going to be games like this where the stat line looks good, but the process reveals struggles. There are going to be moments of visible frustration, turnovers at inopportune times, and shooting performances that don't match her college numbers. That's all part of the journey. But if you're looking for reasons to believe Clark will figure this out, focus on that 24.9 assist performance despite the shooting struggles. Focus on how she started the game with aggression and confidence. Focus on the fact that she's still impacting winning even when her shot isn't falling. Those are the signs of a player who's going to be just fine once she completes this adjustment period. The question isn't whether Caitlin Clark can shoot. We know she can. The question is how long it takes her to rediscover that confidence at the professional level and whether she can remain effective in the meantime. Based on what we just saw, the answer to that second question is clearly yes. She's finding ways to contribute, ways to impact games, ways to help her team win even when her signature skill is betraying her. That's exactly what you want to see from a franchise player working through early career adversity. So when you see her slapping herself in the head in frustration, don't interpret that as a player who's losing confidence. Interpret it as a competitor who knows she's capable of more and refuses to accept anything less than her best. That mentality, combined with her obvious talent and versatility, is why the shooting slump is temporary, but the impact will be permanent. She's going to figure this out. And when she does, the rest of the WNBA better be ready.